Okay, so this one is somewhat related to the last video I uploaded about the situation in Brunei. The horrendous situation where gay men and those accused of adultery will face stoning to death from April the 3rd, 2019. We're almost in the third decade of the 21st century, and this barbaric mentality still prevails in Islamic countries. I want to talk about human rights. I want to talk about how we approach that and about this mentality of their country, their rules. Because almost inevitably, when there are reports about severe human rights violations in some part of the world, there are almost inevitably useful idiots who come out and say their country, their rules. And predictably, that was already the line that some are taking on the videos about the subject that are on YouTube. It depresses me to see that sort of regressive mentality, but doesn't surprise me. So let me just analyze that a little bit. Let me just open that up a little bit, that argument. Their country, their rules. Um, Sovereignty would dictate that yes, countries make their own rules, and that's a sovereign issue. And I do value sovereignty. I think it's very important. Otherwise, we'd have no borders. There would be no countries. There would be, sovereignty is a very sensitive issue, and it's an important issue. I respect that in itself. However, do I believe that sovereignty outweighs human rights? No, I don't. I believe sovereignty is very important. I don't believe that it outweighs human rights. I believe there are very few things that are more important than human rights. And this is an example of a gross violation of the most basic human rights. It's one thing making homosexuality illegal. I mean, it was illegal in many Western countries well into the 20th century. But to stone to death gay men, barbaric. But let me just address this thing about their country, their rules. Those who say that, and there's many Westerners who come out with it as well, um, need to really think about what they're saying. Because essentially, if that's your thinking, then let's give an extreme example. 1930s Germany. Let's say that the future Western allies took the attitude, oh, well, we can't interfere in Germany, that's their domestic affairs. Adolf Hitler's not a very nice man, but hey, it's their internal matters. So if they want to, segregate Jewish people, if they want to smash up Jewish businesses, if they want to introduce eugenics programs, hey, it's all internal affairs. Let's just ignore it. Essentially, that's what that argument comes down to. And to give a more contemporary example, the argument their internal affairs means that Bashar Assad would be given free rein to slaughter thousands of Syrian civilians en masse, as he did and has done. Of course, the war in Syria has become a mini world war with everyone getting involved. Russia propping up the Assad dictatorship on one hand, Britain, France, the United States taking action against it on the other. Um, but this argument of their country, their laws, okay, even if we go down that line and say that's fine, let's just never interfere, let's never say anything, let's just turn a blind eye, which I don't think is an acceptable position to have. Let's say that we go down that line. At the very least, what you can't argue against is that if you're all about sovereignty, then surely countries have a sovereign right to decide who they trade with. So, therefore, in my opinion, we should be boycotting Brunei. We should be recalling their ambassador and demanding some answers over this. Because we surely should have a right to trade with whoever we want. By we, I obviously mean the United Kingdom. And if a country has regressive values, if they are guilty of severe human rights abuses, then we should have the right not to trade with them. And if they don't like that, then that's their problem. So if you're one of those people that says their country, their laws, I'm particularly thinking here about Western people because obviously apologists and those sycophants of the Sultan are going to say that. You know, they're going to have patriotic instincts to defend their country. Fine, that's what you would expect. But those Westerners who say it, I think that's particularly shameful. Okay, no one's asking you to go and join a protest. No one's asking you to sign petitions. No one's asking you to personally boycott Bruneian products. But just don't be useful idiots. Don't defend it. So when people come out and say their country, their laws, that excuse can be used for just about anything. You could use that for the Chinese regime right now, incarcerating millions, potentially millions of Uyghurs in what may be the largest mass incarceration since World War II of dissidents. So I really have a big problem with this mentality, their country, their rules. I think it's a cowardly excuse. I think it's an ignorant excuse because it's not examining what I've just said. That if you really go down that line, then in theory, any callous dictator, any nasty military regime, any totalitarian state can do anything it wants. It can torture people, it can gun down protesters, it can lock up people for criticizing the government because, hey, it's their internal affairs. I think that is a very regressive way of looking at things. Now, I'm a realist. I know that we cannot simply cut off ties with every single country that is doing unpleasant things. That would be impossible. You know, if we only had relations with other Western liberal democracies, it's not workable. But this is a particularly extreme example, and we can do something, and we should. And if it wasn't for this Brexit impasse, I think we should be, we'd be a lot more focused on things like this. I have to be honest, I'm not overly impressed by Jeremy Hunt. I think he should be far more outspoken. I want to see a foreign secretary that will frankly be outspoken on issues like this. And he or she will not care if that attracts controversy. He or she will not care if there's tantrums from the embassy in question, whether that be a powerful country like China or a small country like Brunei. We need to show some backbone. So I mean, Hunt did speak out about persecution of Christians, but I want them to be speaking out about what China's doing right now. I want them to speak out about this, and not just private, sort of polite opposition to, quiet little messages to the Bruneian embassy. They need to be outspoken, say very loudly, very clearly, we will not accept this. You either change and revert this, or we're cutting off trade. You know, the Sultanate of Brunei can say, "Oh, it's our sovereign right to do this." Okay, it's our sovereign right to decide who we trade with. It's all our sovereign right to expel your ambassador, and if that means the British ambassador in Brunei being expelled, then that's what it comes to. That's We have to show backbone, and it infuriates me that, frankly, in the late Cameron and May era, we've been too quiet about too many issues. And I really have a big problem with that. So let's just dispel this idiotic notion of their country, their rules, which indicates you could do anything you want. I know not every country is the same. I certainly don't expect every country to be an exact carbon copy of one another. But can we just drop the political correctness and drop this nonsense that all cultures are equal? A culture that stones people to death is not equal to a secular liberal democracy. It's just not. Because I value human rights far more than I, want to kowtow to politically correct notions of respect. If that leads to allegation, oh, you're a bigot, then I'd rather, I'm not actually. I've got friends from all backgrounds, but I would rather be smeared that way than be silent. It's absolutely disgusting. Shame on Brunei. Shame on the Sultan of Brunei. And shame on those who make excuses for it.